Hi, I'm James, this is Lewis, and in today's edition of Coach's Corner, we're going to talk about core training. Now, traditionally, core training has involved a lot of crunch and sit-up type movements, but the work of Dr. Stuart McGill, who is a biomechanics researcher and lower back expert, has kind of changed our minds and the way we think about core exercises, because what he found is a lot of crunch and spinal flexion type movements can cause a lot of compressional force on the spine, on the intervertebral discs, which can potentially lead to problems, especially in those with back issues already. So what he suggested is a better way to work the core muscles is through isometric work. And that's what we're going to look at today. And we're going to look at three categories of isometric exercise. The first being an anti-extension exercise, where the core muscles are working as a unit to prevent this extension movement, this arching movement in the lower back. So Lewis is going to show us a very simple anti-extension exercise that I'm sure you've all done before, which is a plank. So here you can see all of Lewis's core muscles are working as a unit to maintain his back position. So he's got a slightly flexed back, which is perfect for this position. And his core muscles are working as a unit to prevent that extension or that arching position. So Lewis is going to go onto a Swiss ball, and we can make this exercise more challenging. So the Swiss ball adds a little bit of instability. That means our core muscles have to work harder to maintain that position. And we can make it harder again by doing what we call a plank extension, where we roll the ball away, and now the further away, the harder it's going to be to maintain that spinal position. So his core muscles again are going to have to work as a unit to prevent that spine extension. So that's the first exercise. The second group of exercises is what we call anti-rotation. And here, the core muscles are having to work as a unit, work isometrically to prevent rotation. Okay, so what we're going to do is a very simple anti-rotation hold. So here, what Lewis is going to do, all his core muscles are having to work as a unit to prevent rotation, with the rotational force coming from this band here, which is trying to pull him across. So this one we would just do holds for time, so something like 20 to 30 seconds would work very well. You can use a band, you can use a cable machine. We can make that harder by increasing the resistance, and this time doing what we call a Pallof press, where we extend the arms away, and the further we go away, the more force there's going to be, so the more resistance there's going to be that his muscles are going to have to work against. But again, the spine, the muscles that stabilize the spine are working to prevent movement rather than create movement. Okay, so that would be an anti-rotation exercise. The third group of exercises is what we call anti-lateral flexion. So lateral flexion would be this movement, okay, this sort of side bending of the spine. And what we're going to look at first of all is a side plank. So with a side plank, Lewis's core muscles and really specifically his obliques are going to have to work hard to prevent that lateral flexion movement. So what he would do is do a hold on this side and then a hold on the other side to work the muscles, the oblique muscles on the other side. And a way that we can progress this type of work is by introducing a weight. So Lewis is going to take hold of a heavy kettlebell, and he's going to stand up nice and tall and try and maintain this perfect posture position. So here, his obliques and his core muscles are having to work hard to prevent this lateral flexion movement, and it's really the obliques on the opposite side to the weight he's holding which will be working really hard. We can make this one more dynamic by doing what we call a suitcase carry, where he's going to walk in this position to make it a more dynamic version of this anti-lateral flexion exercise. Brilliant, thank you very much. So we talked about these isometric exercises and how they can be really beneficial. Now, I don't necessarily think spinal flexion exercises are bad. I think the problem can potentially come in when people are doing sort of excessive spinal flexion work. So sort of hundreds of crunches, hundreds of sit-ups. I think that's what can potentially lead to the problem. I actually do like spinal flexion exercises, and we will incorporate them. But if you want a more full core workout, then I think we should look to include exercises from each of these categories. So some anti-extension work, some anti-rotation work, some anti-lateral flexion work, and some spinal flexion work, but each of those sparingly. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next week.